Okay. Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
It's about the moon. We were talking earlier that Shavuot is the one holiday. It's not tied into the phase of the moon. So Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the month, and many of the Sukkot and Pesach are the 15th day, and Shavuot, it's not prescribed as a certain date. It's the number of days from Passover. And so we were talking about the moon, and does anyone know how, if you look at the moon, can you tell instantly if it's waning or waxing without looking at the calendar?
It feels silly that I wouldn't know the answer. Is it that it waxes from the top or the bottom and wanes from the top or the bottom?
Well, it's not top or bottom. It's left or right or left.
Okay.
If it's big on the right, it's waxing. If it's big on the left, it's waning.
The way I remember it, my father had a Latin expression for it, and I've been trying to find it on the internet for years. And I thought if I brought it up now, maybe people would tell me. But I think of how Hebrew is written from right to left. The phases of the moon go from right to left. If it's dark on the right, the dark is increasing. If it's bright, if it's light on the right, the light is increasing. As you look at it, it's always moving from left to right. From right to left, just as Hebrew does.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for starting us off with that. That's a really beautiful little learning that we just had right as we get started. So I want to welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Eifler. I am the Program Director of Jewish Veg, and we're going to get started. And so I'm so excited to welcome you here on behalf of myself, of Jewish Veg, of our fabulous colleagues from these 4 organizations, putting on this webinar from Ancient Harvest to Home Kitchen. And before we really get started, I just want to go over a couple of ground rules. So if everyone could please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, that would be really helpful for us. We just don't want to have a lot of background noise and interruptions. So you should all be muted right now. So if you could just keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, that would be really helpful. We really do want to have an interactive and really great conversation going throughout this presentation. And one way that might be helpful to facilitate that, if you're new to Zoom, if you go up to the top right of your screen on your desktop, if you're on mobile, I think you swipe to the right, you can see a gallery view. And that's where you can see everyone who is here in the room with you. So if you would just take a moment to toggle back and forth, you can set it on speaker view, which is just whoever's talking, or that gallery view, and just get a sense of everyone who is here with you today. And we'd love for you to stay engaged and participate with us. And so if to do that, if you go to the bottom of the screen, on your Zoom screen, you'll see a little chat box. If you click on that, and you go ahead and type in your name, where you're joining us from today, and why you're here with us, we would really love to hear from you. And throughout the presentation, you can use that chat box for questions, for comments. We'll do our best to answer questions as they come up, but we also have a Q&A session towards the end where we'll be answering questions then as well. But please feel free to use that chat box throughout and just participate in this conversation with us. And so I really am so excited for all of the amazing learning that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be learning about Shavuot, the origins of the holiday, the roots of the holiday, how our celebration has evolved as a community, and how we can evolve that even further. And you're going to hear a particular emphasis on celebrating plant-based. And so I just want to take a moment to talk really briefly about why we feel that is so important, and in particular, why we feel a dairy-free celebration is so important. Or to put it a little more plainly, what's the problem with dairy? Because that's not always really obvious. And so the short answer, to keep it pretty brief here, is that like meat, dairy is mass-produced in factory farms. In fact, the meat and dairy industries aren't separate industries, they are the same industry. In a factory farm, a mother cow is tied in place. She isn't able to walk around, let alone go outside, and she is constantly impregnated and given hormones to continually produce milk and give birth to babies. And if everyone could just please keep yourself muted, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much. And so this constant strain on the body of the cow is really profound and really devastating. Not to mention the emotional strain of this mother constantly seeing her babies taken away from her. Those babies are either they become dairy cows themselves, or they're slaughtered for veal. And cows naturally have a lifespan of about 25 years. In factory farms, they only live around 6 years. At about that time, their bodies stop producing at the rate that mass consumption demands. And so they are then killed. And so this is a really devastating and abusive way that our animals are treated in our current society. And on top of that, the strain and stress that is put on the bodies of the cows is actually equal to the strain and stress we put on our own bodies. There's a reason that 75% of Jews are lactose intolerant, and that is because we were never meant to be drinking the milk of another species. The reason that cows produce milk, just like any animals produce milk, is for their babies, in this case, cow babies, calves. And so when we as human beings are drinking the breast milk of another species, that damages our own bodies. None of that is even mentioning the environmental impact, which is also really profound and devastating. The factory farms are one of the leading causes of climate change. They produce more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector combined. And that's not to mention land usage, deforestation, water usage, pollution, and issues like global injustice, worker injustice, poverty, global hunger. All of these issues intersect, and they all find their crux in our use and misuse of animals. And so the 4 organizations that are presenting this workshop to you today are very different in some ways. We have different programs and agendas. We cover different ranges of topics. We have different primary agendas. There are a lot of distinctions between our organizations, but what we share is a conviction that conversations around the intersection of Judaism, animal rights, and environmental sustainability are critical. And that's what we hope that you will be taking from this workshop today. And so with that, I would really love to introduce our 4 organizations who will be presenting to you today. As I said, my name is Sarah Eifler. I'm the Program Director of Jewish Veg, and we are a national nonprofit that inspires and assists Jews to adopt plant-based diets as an expression of Jewish values. We offer a variety of programs and events centered on our highest Jewish values of compassion for animals, concern for our health, and care for the environment. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lisa Affelberg. I'm the director of Shamayim Jewish Animal Advocacy, and we are also a national nonprofit, and we run programs that support the Jewish community in learning more about veganism and animal advocacy, such as the Synagogue Vegan Challenge and Try Vegan for 22 Days program. We're really excited to be a part of growing the vegetarian and vegan Jewish community and supporting all of you. And I look forward to telling you more about Shamayim at the end of our webinar today. And I'm going to turn it over to Becky.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending what time zone you're in, and also good evening to those of you joining us from the other side of the Atlantic from our chat box. I see there are several of you, so glad you're all here. I am Becky O'Brien. I am the Director of Food and Climate at Hazon. Hazon is the largest faith-based environmental organization in the United States. And in a nutshell, everything we do is about connecting people and connecting Jews more deeply to the earth that sustains us. And our mission is a healthier and more environmentally sustainable world for all. And I'm really glad you're here, and turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Hoffman, and I direct the Jewish Initiative for Animals, or JIFA for short, and I'm based in Los Angeles. We're a national project as well that's entirely dedicated to supporting Jewish communities and expressing the value of Tsar Balei Chaim, of Jewish compassion for animals, through both Jewish education and adopting sustainable institutional food practices. So we host and help develop educational programs. We create novel curriculum And we also work with Jewish institutions, with caterers, food service providers, and dining staff to shift toward sourcing food that is more humane and sustainable. And we consult with institutions through our Jewish Leadership Circle program, which awards recognition to institutions that commit to sourcing more plant-based meals. And we also guide them through that program in buying products from sources outside factory farming systems. So our goal is to build healthier food systems by building a Jewish movement that commits to supporting alternatives to factory farming. And I am delighted, as always, to introduce Rabbi Aryeh Bernstein, JIFA's staff educator who is based in Chicago. And the texts that Aryeh will be teaching from are part of a new text study guide that JIFA developed for Shavuot this year. So it explores the holidays' food traditions and specifically the focus on dairy. And if you're thinking about a resource for your Tikkun Leil or something like that for any Shavuot learning you might be involved in this year, you might want to check out this set of texts to engage folks around your food traditions. We'll talk more about our other resources from our various organizations later. So please, Aryeh, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Lisa, Sarah, and Becky. Melissa, should I go ahead and share my screen and access the slide presentation from my own, or were you going to do it? You do it, great. So we're going to do some visual learning momentarily. Again, my name is Aryeh Bernstein. I live in Chicago, and I'm very happy to be here representing JIFA. What we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so doing is exploring a wide array of traditional food practices for Shavuot. We'll culminate by discussing what is today the best known food practice for Shavuot, which is the consumption of dairy, and do some thinking about what that's about. And when we do that, that'll be kind of a taste of what's in this resource, the written resource that I encourage you all to utilize. But we'll do some background before that. So Melissa, whenever you're ready, I'm happy to use the slideshow. So yeah, look at the next slide. What foods are traditional on Shavuot is really the question that we're asking here. What is that all about? Like, how widely should we understand that question? Next slide. So if you look in what the Torah actually says about Shavuot, we're going to look at two different verses of the Torah. First, Numbers chapter 28. For those who are shul goers, this is the maftir special additional reading that is read for the Torah reading on Shavuot. And there are two things that I want to highlight here. One is that the main name for Shavuot, the holiday that we call Shavuot, which means weeks, is referred to as Yom HaBikurim in the Torah, the day of first fruits. We think about this time of the year agriculturally, calendrically. This is the time that a lot of crops are beginning to come into flourishing. If Pesach represented the planting season, Shavuot is the beginning of the harvest, and Sukkot is going to be the end of the harvest. So Bikurim, what this means is that when our crops begin to sprout, to grow, we don't just immediately start gorging ourselves. First, for each crop, we have to bring an offering from the first fruit to the altar and offer that to God as a recognition of gratitude, what it means to be living in a bountiful world that has enough to feed us. And so the second thing I want to point out is that the specific offering for Shavuot is a mincha chadasha, an offering of new grain. It's specifically focused on grain. If you remember the practice that we've been doing from Pesach up to Shavuot called counting the omer. An omer is a sheaf of the barley plant that is brought from the old, counting it from the old harvest, the end of the old harvest every day, waiting for the new harvest to come in. So mincha chadasha, we take our brand new grain and offer an offering from that. And after that, we see that there in the second line, in the Hebrew, it is Bishavuotechem. This day of first fruits occurs on your weeks, on your festival of weeks. We have a sacred day. We turn to the next slide. We'll see another passage earlier in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, where we have the laws of all the holidays in Parshat Emor, which we read several weeks ago. And there, after the laws of Pesach, Passover, and the laws of counting the Omer, here it is, you count for yourselves from the day after that Shabbat, which is taken to be the day after Pesach, 7 whole weeks, until the day after the 7th week, you count 50 days and bring an offering of new grain to Hashem. That's our new grain again. And specifically here, it says, Mimosh votechem, from your settlements, from wherever you live, you shall bring 2 loaves of elevation bread. Taviu lechem tunufa shtayim, 2/10 of an ephah, that's a volume measurement of semolina. They shall be leavened, they shall be baked, first fruits to Adonai. I want to point out a couple things. The main thing we've seen so far in our 2 Torah passages is that the traditional Shavuot food is bread, and specifically new fresh bread and baked as chametz, as leavened. We see in the last phrase there. That's unusual. Almost all grain offerings in the sacrificial cult in the Torah are meant to be matzah, simple bread, unleavened bread. And bringing chametz to the altar, which is bread that is already in the process of decomposition. That's what leavening does. What makes it so rich is that moment of we're super alive and delicious right now, and grabbing this moment before it starts to decompose and turn the other way, as opposed to unleavened bread, which is less rich but lasts a longer time. Part of the idea that a lot of the commentaries get at for the offering for Shavuot, seeing the new harvest come in, is a recognition of this is the day, unbelievable joy and bounty, the one time of really living for today. We're going to offer an offering to God of leavened bread that is so rich, so puffy, so delicious, that we're not even worried about planning for tomorrow or the next day when it starts to go stale. And this is one of only 2 settings in the sacrificial cult that have chametz offerings. So that's from the Torah's perspective, the main focus of the Shavuot food orientation is bread, new grain, chametz, puffy, delicious, decadent, fresh bread loaves. If you look at the next slide, we'll see that as this is translated into rabbinic law, so this tractate of Bikurim isn't a tractate about the rituals and laws of the Shavuot festival per se. It's the tractate that legislates the laws of bringing first fruits. So you are a farmer, this is your 3-chapter guidebook for what the laws are, which crops have to be brought as first fruits, how early or how mature, what if there's a beginning of a sprout but it's not yet really good food, how early, how late. So this Mishnah, the 3rd Mishnah of the 1st chapter, tells us that first fruits are brought not only from wheat, though that was the biblical sacrifice, but from the 7 species. And they're not brought from other species other than the 7 species. And they're also not brought before Shavuot. So even if you have a really tenacious plant that shows itself a little earlier, Shavuot is opening day of the harvest season from our ritual perspective. And that is the time that whatever crops are beginning to sprout, then Shavuot is opening day for that. From an agricultural law perspective, if crops come into harvest a little bit later, they're not ready on Shavuot, you'll bring them when they're ready, when the temple is standing. But Shavuot is opening day for the harvest season, and the first fruits laws applies to the 7 species. So you can imagine that Shavuot, in addition to being explicitly having this focus on bread, also this Mishnah expands our focus to the 7 species that are special and abundant in the land of Israel. If you look to the next slide, just so we can remind ourselves what are those 7 species. We see I've bolded them in both the Hebrew and the English: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, specifically olive oil, and dates for their honey. Most scholars understand that in most places in the Torah where honey, devash, is referred to, it's referring to date honey rather than bees honey, though there's some dispute about that. Certainly in the book of Judges, we do see references to abundant bees honey as well. But these are the 7 plant-based food items that represent, that symbolize food sustainability and abundance. When the Torah tells us, I mean, this is in Moses's epic speech before he dies and before the people crosses over into the land. Adonai, your God, is bringing you into a good land, a land with water streams and springs and fountains issuing from valley and mountain. And the picture is that coming out of the desert, where it was only through dependence on God and miracles of provision of manna that we were able to survive for 40 years in the desert. And now we're going into a land of abundance and sustainability. And these are the 7 species that manifest a well-balanced, sustainable, abundant diet. Yeah, Becky, I saw the question. Vines, Geffen refers to the grape plants. I know in English the word vine sometimes is used to refer to other plants that grow in that way, but the same way that in European languages the word for wine and the word for vine is the same word, vintage, vine, etc. Same in Geffen. Geffen in Hebrew refers to the grape vintage. So those are our 7 species which the Mishnah has legislated. It is these species that we're watching, and that as they begin to sprout around Shavuot, Shavuot is opening day for these species and the celebration. So we've now expanded our focus for the traditional biblical foods and Mishnaic foods of Shavuot as being these 7 species, and especially wheat and barley that can be made into puffy, delicious bread. We look at the next slide. So what is the deal with dairy? Okay, some animal welfare rabbi is going and talking on and on about how it's all these fruits and pomegranates and puffy bread and everything. Everybody I know eats dairy on Shavuot. Everybody knows that's the case. I stay up all night, we eat cheesecake and we study Torah. Everybody knows that's what it's about. So what are you trying to hide? Where's the hidden source? So from the Middle Ages on, many Jewish sources do record a custom to eat dairy on Shavuot. Numerous reasons are produced to retroactively support this custom. We don't see it before medieval texts, although it becomes very widespread after that, starting in the Ashkenazi world and spreading into the Sephardic world as well, such that by the late medieval and early modern times, you see it as a very well-known popular custom. And I saw one article that counted as many as 10 different explanations given for why. So I'm going to look in this setting just at one of the most commonly cited explanations, one of the texts that is most cited. It's not the only one. In the pregame discussion beforehand, Stanley mentioned another one, which is also brought in some sources. If you get a hold of the Jiffa resource that we're going to make available for Shavuot, you will see that there we've compiled 5 or 6 different reasons given in traditional sources, and we analyze what those reasons mean in our contemporary world. So we're going to go just into one today for the purpose of time. Look at the next slide. So this is a text called the Kolbo, which was a very influential late medieval compendium of Jewish law. It was especially prominent in Ashkenazi legal writing, halachic writing, also later on in Sephardic writing. Uncertain editorship, probably Provence, southern France, and becomes heavily quoted later on. So the Kolbo says the following. In recording the customs for Shavuot, it says they were also accustomed, Jewish people were accustomed to eat honey and milk on Shavuot because of the Torah, which is compared to honey and milk. As it is said, honey and milk are under your tongue. That's a quote from Shir HaShirim, the biblical book of Song of Songs. And that, of course, is read on multiple levels. The Book of Song of Songs is a collection of poetic, romantic and erotic love poetry between two lovers. And one lover is now saying to the other that, you know, kissing you is so sweet, so luscious, that it's like there's honey and milk under your tongue. And the entire book is understood by the Mishnaic rabbis as a metaphor for the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And so the entire book is seen to be about descriptions about God or about the Jewish people. And here, this verse is traditionally understood as being God speaking romantically, lovingly to the Jewish people, saying, what makes you, the Jewish people, so precious that it's like there's honey and milk under your tongue. And what do honey and milk represent there? In rabbinic midrash, the Torah. It is the Torah that is lush, sweet, etc. So that's the first thing. The Kolbo recognizes this custom. It's not just milk, it's also honey. I imagine that in the medieval European context, he's not talking about date honey, but bees honey at this point. And he reflects this custom, saying that it's about Torah. And so since Shavuot has, since the Talmudic period, been associated as the time of receiving Torah, that must be the reason why Jews, as far as we go out and see, everybody's eating dairy on Shavuot. It must be because, look at that, milk represents Torah, and we're so happy about Torah. He also notes that it's the custom of all the Jewish people to put saffron in cake. And the reason is that it gladdens the heart, because saffron cake is special and delicious. Of course you should make saffron cake for Shavuot. Everybody does it. Also, women have been accustomed to making on Shavuot long bread with 4 heads. That seems fun. It seems that we can find in this custom a recollection of the 2 loaves offered on Shavuot. Remember that special Shavuot offering? Or maybe because of the astrological sign of Gemini, which serves in the month of Sivan, the month of Shavuot. So maybe this doubled paired bread. Now, I have a hard time visualizing exactly what the Kolbo is referring to with this bread, but go play with that. How fun would that be to make wacky mirrored bread that represents both the 2 loaves that we offered, you know, our abundance and our dedication to the Creator who creates enough food for the world, and also recognizing twins and the astrological sign of this time of year. These customs are mentioned together all as universal. I want to reflect on something about the milk according to the Kolbo, milk and honey. It represents abundance, it represents Torah, it represents sweetness and plenty. Part of the way it does that poetically is that honey and milk bring us back to the poetic association of the land of Israel as a land flowing with milk and honey. And what it means when the Torah describes the land of Israel as a land flowing with milk and honey is that coming out of the desert and slavery before that, when we were dependent and unable to guarantee our own food security, or in the desert when we had food security only through dependence on God but no involvement in it, the land of Israel is going to be a place flowing with milk and honey, a land flowing with food sustainability, a balanced ecosystem, animals and plants in harmony with each other, not being exhausted. That's, I think, the function of that poetic metaphor. Now, if we were all pastoral people today, and each of us interacted with animals in their lives and plants in their lives and had a real sense of the caretaking of animals, as well as plants and their schedules, their paces, I think we could have a lively discussion among the different organizations on this call and individuals on this call. Would it be appropriate to consume milk and relate to it in this positive way as a symbol of abundant sustenance? Or would that still now be problematic? We have enough protein sources elsewhere, and this milk is meant for the calves and not for other species, and maybe we should be abstaining from it entirely. And I think we would have a robust and healthy discussion about what would be appropriate there. But that's all kind of moot in the world that we live in today. you look at the next slide. This is our dairy today. Our dairy today is cows, not goats, first of all. And the gestation period of cows is very different from the gestation period of the goats that were coming into fertility and making milk at the time of Shavuot. And so the gestation period of cows is more year-round and not even symbolic of this time. And secondly, the cows are held in captivity in conditions that, as was mentioned, as Sarah mentioned earlier, result in utter cruelty to the animals, abuse of the earth, and significant food safety issues in terms of the milk that's produced. When we talk about milk in 2020 America or anywhere in the West, we're talking about something that is very, very far from the milk described in the Torah's description of a land flowing with milk and honey, and in Song of Songs, erotic poetry of milk and honey under your tongue, or in the Kolbo's comment about Shavuot. If the Kolbo looked at people eating milk as we eat it today, without the barriers obstructing our view that we see, it would not evoke Torah and our love of Torah as sweetness and as sustenance and as sustainability. It evokes a dystopia of cruelty and throwing our planet out of whack. Wherever we're concerned about the plight of workers and immigrants, factory farmers are the epicenter of that discussion. Where we're concerned about environmental protection and global warming, factory farms are the epicenter of that. Where we're worried about animal welfare and about the safety of our food systems, factory farms are the epicenter. All the things that are represented by the poetry of milk in the Torah and in Shir HaShirim, and the poetry ascribed to the practice of eating dairy in texts like the Kolbo, are all actually quite the opposite of what milk and dairy are in today's market. If we radically change our food system, we eradicate factory farms, we can get back to a robust conversation about whether milk manifests, can manifest today the abundance, the plenty, and the sustainability evoked poetically through these customs. I think it's pretty clear that in our economy, that's impossible. And the good news is, this isn't just about taking down what we have. Remember that that same Kolbo that mentioned the practice of consuming milk mentions that everybody bakes saffron bread. You wouldn't normally use saffron for everyday baking. It's a special holiday treat and it's delicious. It gladdens the heart. We want to move to the next slide. This will be a good, or actually let's take off the screen share so we can see each other for a second as I wrap up. Then we'll bring it back to Becky in a second. If we, yeah, baking saffron bread could be an amazing revival of a traditional holiday treat. Everybody did it, according to the Kolbo, and that's been lost. What a shame, and what an opportunity now, especially now that it seems from the internet that lots of people are baking a lot more now. Bake saffron bread, traditional Shavuot bread, and think about the bounty, what it means that even in a time of fear and pandemic, we still have plenty, we have food, we have puffy, rich bread that we're allowed to celebrate this moment. Maybe think about, like with the 7 species that are actually coming into harvest right now, think about where you live, what is coming into harvest. And the same way that our sages have traditionally taken what was available and new and fresh and retroactively, poetically given it meaning, let's act the same way today. If strawberries are just coming into harvest where you are, bake a delicious strawberry shortcake or strawberry cake or strawberry bread, or eat the fresh strawberries that are coming into where you are, and create your own associations to the Torah you've just received the night before. Strawberries are red, and red evokes fire, And the Torah is compared to fire, and God spoke to Moses for the first time from the fire of the burning bush. Let's exercise the same creativity that our sages did for all of these customs, which were retroactive connections to people eating what was abundant and available at this time because it's the calving season. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becky to continue teaching us about what the meaning of freedom for Shavuot.
Arya, thank you so much. Really, thank you. Melissa, if you'll come back to our slides. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. Again, I'm Becky O'Brien with Hazon. And I will be talking about this journey of freedom from to freedom to, and we can go ahead and go to my first slide. So one way that we can think about these spring holidays that we have in our Jewish tradition is that Passover is freedom from, primarily freedom from slavery in Egypt, and that Shavuot is freedom to. And it's a really interesting thing to think about because Shavuot, in addition to its very rich history as an agricultural harvest holiday, is primarily actually really celebrated as the holiday in which we commemorate the giving of the Torah. And it's actually interesting and important to note that it's the giving of the Torah that we're celebrating and not the receiving of the Torah, because Torah, it's each generation's and each individual's to receive. And Judaism is a living and iterative religion. And so it's for me to look and say, how do I take this document and apply it to my life in today's times? How do you receive Torah in your life in these times? And one of the things Arya was just sharing with us is that the implications around dairy in our times are not the same as the implications around dairy when this was written and when you could say certain things about dairy. And so what in our context, in our times, does it mean? And another fascinating thing to explore that we learned with Arya just now is that there are different norms for different times. What feels totally Jewish and traditional to us, this dairy component of the Shavuot celebration would be totally unfamiliar to Jews of other times. Norms evolve, they're shaped by the context of their times. And today we're exploring how the norm and tradition of dairy on Shavuot could evolve. Next slide, please. So I was talking about freedom from and freedom to, and you'll see here, have we been using our freedom to wisely? Arya shared about the impact on animals in our current industrial animal agriculture system. We've been using our freedom to support a very cruel industry. And along the way, as you'll see from some of the information on this page here, we've been using our freedom in a way that's created an urgent climate crisis. And a big chunk of that climate crisis is connected to industrial animal agriculture. As Americans, we're using our freedom to consume twice the recommended intake of protein. We're using that freedom and all that protein consumption to be 4 times as likely to die as people of cancer as those whose diets are low in animal protein. Even though we're the richest 10% of the global population, we're using that freedom that we have, being so wealthy, to be responsible for half of carbon emissions. You can see throughout this page that this is how we've been using our freedom too. And life of Torah is a life of being in harmony and in balance. And we've been using our freedom too to get way out of balance with the earth, with animals, with the seasons, with each other. And so this is a time to consider, do we want to receive Torah as a way to get back in balance, back in harmony? So my next slide, please. It's a little bit long, but I really love this teaching, so I want to share it with you. First, just at the top to contextualize, Hazon is really focused on, as are many of the organizations on this call, the impact of the industrial animal agriculture on climate change and global warming, and choosing to eat fewer animal products is probably the most important action an individual can take to reverse global warming. That's part of why we're having this conversation today. So mitzvot blessings, the Talmud, tzedakah, the multiple and many rules and traditions and customs and byways of Jewish life, the central intent of our Jewish tradition, it's to control instinct, to constrain lust and appetite in the widest senses, and to encourage us to do right in ways small and large. Jewish law, halakha, raises significant challenges for us in Western society. We've come to believe that freedom means you can do anything, I'll do anything as long as we mind each other's business. Everything is fine. You leave me alone, I leave you alone. But we're now finding out that the way we've been using that freedom is we're getting beyond the carrying capacity of planet Earth, and it challenges us to rethink this. Halakha, our Jewish tradition, our Torah, offers a very particular antidote to the tragedy of the commons, and it suggests that some combination of values, rules, laws, customs, and the daily reinforcement of education and social sanction is a critical key not only to a good life, but to a good community, a good society, and perhaps a good world. I've been thinking a lot actually about freedom within the context of coronavirus. We're all experiencing some pretty new and very radical feeling rules designed to keep us and our communities safe. I've been thinking in particular about how some people are really resistant to the idea of not being able to open their business unless they are following specific guidelines and restrictions. And there's a lot of talk about these rules impinging on freedom and liberty. And I'm wondering if these same people feel like red lights and stop signs are taking away their freedom and liberty. Obviously, these are pretty different, like telling me my restaurant can't be open, or it can be open, but I can only do takeout, is different than red lights. But there are connections. And it got me thinking about how actually in our daily lives, we're actually accepting limitations to our freedom all the time. I mean, honestly, I'd be really happy to never get a red light ever again in my whole life. I find it extremely frustrating. It feels very limiting to me, but I totally accept that limitation. And society as a whole, we totally accept that limitation here. Part of that's because it's so entrenched. It feels almost invisible and totally normal to us. It's like the halakha of our society. Thou shalt stop at a red light. It just feels normal to us. So we don't resist against that impingement on my freedom to just drive whenever and wherever I want to. It's also so very obvious how that limitation and the laws around red lights keep me safe and keep others safe. We just simply couldn't be out there driving around without the system of limitations and rules. So it really has me thinking about the function of Torah and limitations and rules on our food choices. And I want to share quickly, I've been reading Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. It's a book I've been wanting to read, and in the time of coronavirus, I was particularly interested in his story. And he's an internationally renowned psychiatrist, and he spent years in Nazi concentration camps. And partly because of his suffering there, he developed a psychotherapy approach known as logotherapy. And at the core of his theory is that our primary motivational force is our search for meaning, man's search for meaning. And it's really a book about how our lives are a lot about our attitudes. And I'm like, here we are at a time and people are having radically different experiences about what's happening in terms of coronavirus and our attitudes and choice and freedom. And so I just want to read this one paragraph from this book. Freedom, however, is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. That is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. And so that just really dovetailed right in with this freedom from, freedom to conversation. So I wanted to share that with you guys. On my next slide, please. So for 2,000 years, we've asked, is this food fit for me to eat? That's what kashrut is. Kashrut means fit. And we've been, as a people, restraining our food choices. Whether or not you keep kosher now, our people as a whole, historically, it's been a fundamental piece of our religion to be saying, can I eat this or can I not eat this? It's been a normal part of Jewish history. And what we've learned is that, and I love this line here, within Jewish communities and beyond, we must now say we are living proof that limiting our food choices doesn't diminish our happiness, it increases it. And earlier on the chat, someone introduced themselves and shared that they were a newly vegan family. And someone else responded, "That's wonderful. So much abundance is coming." That was their response. Someone said, "We have just decided to limit our food choices." And someone else said, "So much abundance is coming." That is what our tradition has taught us. I loved seeing that exchange in our chat box. It doesn't diminish our happiness, it increases it. And so we're here to encourage you to explore this idea. And I want to say that I only make one assumption about the eating practices of people on this call, and that's that they are very wide-ranging. I assume we have everyone from omnivores to vegan and everywhere in between. So I don't make assumptions about anybody's eating choices on here, but we are proposing, Hazon is suggesting, and others on this call join me along this spectrum of saying we cannot tackle climate change without reducing our consumption of animal products. And we're here to say that that reduction is something that we can celebrate, that that's something that can be bringing us into harmony with the Torah in a way to be really genuinely celebrating Shavuot for ourselves. And then to my final slide. Oh, that was my final slide. I got mixed up. So the last point that I really wanted to make then is that yes, limitations can actually be and feel freeing. They can push us to explore new options. Many of you have experienced, clearly some of you in the chat box have shared that often by exploring how to be more plant-based, we're getting out of ruts and widely increasing the variety and adventure in our food choices. Limits can actually be expansive. This isn't about giving things up. It's about leaning into our new options, leaning into living in harmony, living in balance. And in celebration of Shavuot, in celebration of Torah, please consider what you are free to do, what choices you are free to make that reflect Jewish values and hence are good for people, animals, and our home, the earth. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you both Becky and Rabbi Aryeh for the amazing and fabulous learning that we've done. And to kind of further Becky's point that she was just making about how we've really increased our abundance and our limitations really increase our happiness, I want to hand it over to a fabulous and amazing chef and member of the Jewish Ved Board of Directors, Brett Trueman, who is going to demonstrate for us how to make a vegan cheesecake.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm using a recipe from New York City Vegan, the Vegan Modes. They're calling themselves the Vegan Modes, Michael Sushman and F. Ethan Simmons. So the link to the recipe is going to be available. The cheesecake recipe requires first that we make a crust, a bottom crust. And the bottom crust, according to the recipe, you make with graham cracker, crumbs, and non-dairy butter. So I had to do this in advance because we don't have a lot of time for this. What I did is I used Miyoko's, a lot of different non-dairy butters. I used Miyoko, really like Miyoko. And instead of graham cracker crumbs, first of all, graham crackers are often made with honey, and I didn't want to use honey. So looking for something else, and I found the Biscoff Lotus cookies. You might recognize them from what you might get on airplanes. Some airlines serve these Biscoff cookies. And,
is that Biscoff cookie butter? Is that Biscoff?
Biscoff cookies, yes.
Or, yeah, oh. So they're saying instead of using graham crackers for their cheesecake crust, they use Biscoff cookies.
Yes, that's what I do.
Because they don't have honey in them. Isn't that interesting?
You could please keep yourself muted and type any questions into the chat box. That would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, so the Biscoff is naturally vegan. I don't think they meant it to be vegan, but it is vegan. And I just put that in a food processor. Got it nice and crumbly. Then I mix it in with the butter and baked it for 10 minutes. And this is what you get. Now, you have to put it in a springform pan, because otherwise, you put it in a regular pan, you're not going to be able to get it out of the pan. Cheesecake, it's not easy to get out of the pan. With a springform pan, you just undo the latch and you've got your cake. Remember to have aluminum foil underneath, because even though many manufacturers say that their pans are leak-proof, they're never leak-proof. So you got to put something under. I learned that the hard way when my oven got full of cheesecake. So that's the crust. Now let's get to the filling. So for the filling, calls for cream cheese, non-dairy cream cheese. So there's a lot of different brands out there. I got the Tofutti cream cheese. You can get them at Trader Joe's. Kai Hill makes some. Everything that you use has to be at room temperature. So I put out the cream cheese 3 hours ago, and it calls for 4 8-ounce tubs. So I put them already in my mixing bowl, again to save time. And now I'm going to add the other ingredients. So the other ingredients are the lemon juice, the 2 teaspoons lemon juice, the sugar, it's 1.5 cups of sugar. You have to be careful when you buy sugar, because sugar isn't necessarily vegan, because many sugars are processed through bone char. If you get something that's organic, if it says organic sugar, then it's not processed through bone char, it's vegan. So you put sugar in, and then it calls for vanilla. You want to get a good vanilla. Don't want to use imitation. If you're going to make something, for me, I like to make something that tastes really, really good, so I use good ingredients. So I got the 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, a pinch of salt, and I call a pinch of salt like a 1/16 of a teaspoon. And flour. Calls for 3 tablespoons of flour. If you want to make this gluten-free, you use gluten-free flour. Then, of course, you'd have to find something to replace the graham crackers with, because they're not, or the Biscoff with, because they're not vegan. Actually, they're not gluten-free. Okay, so I got all that together. I think I didn't miss anything. So it goes into the mixer on medium speed. It's very important that you don't have it on high speed, because too much air is going to get in. And if you get too much air in, then the cheesecake's just going to be too soft. So this has to go for 3 minutes. If I did it for 3 minutes, you'd hear this large noise and you wouldn't hear me. So after this is done, you need to add to it energy egg replacer, which is let's say, call for 2 tablespoons of energy egg replacer. You can make your own egg replacer, or you can use it. They have like Bob's Red Mill egg replacer, or you go on the web. There's a recipe for the substitute egg replacer. Calls for like tapioca flour and potato flour and baking soda and baking powder, baking salt, soda and baking powder. So it's easy to do. So after you have 3 minutes at medium speed, again, you don't want to go for too long or too high a speed. You would put in the flour, which I'm not going to do, the egg replacer, and you put in the sour cream. The sour cream I use is Tofutti sour cream. So you put that in, and you just incorporate. It says be on low until it's incorporated. Again, you don't want to beat for too long. And after it's done, you'll pour it back into the pan. fill it up. You will level out the top. And the instructions tell you to first have the oven at 350 degrees for 15 minutes and then down to 250 degrees. It's very important to be lowering the temperature over time. Also, what many people do is put the pan in a water bath. It's supposed to keep the cake moist, adds humidity to the oven. This recipe doesn't call for that, and when I make it, it turns out to be completely fine without the water bath. So you also want to keep it. The recipe says have it in the refrigerator for like 4 to 6 hours. I recommend having it overnight because overnight it's going to firm up more. So, and again, you don't want a cheesecake that's just going to just melt. You want to have a cheesecake that's firm. So I made a cheesecake yesterday, so I knew I wouldn't have time to finish it here. So let me bring out my cheesecake to show you. I don't have a whole cheesecake because I couldn't wait to test it. So I was not going to leave it whole. So this is what it turns out to be. And looks like regular cheesecake. Tastes amazing. Absolutely amazing. So that's in a shortened version of making a cheesecake. Vegan cheesecake.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that for us. I wish we could somehow pass it around and sample it, but we will be sending out the recipe. So thank you for doing a food demo. That's a fun way to end some learning lessons that we did. So appreciate you being here. Someone asked you to hold it up again one more time. Ooh. Wonderful. Well, if people would now like to ask any questions, we are moving to our questions and answers part. If you have any questions from the presentations, you can go back to gallery view so you can all see each other again. But if people want to ask questions, if they could put their question in the chat button and we will respond to those, that would be great. And the questions can be from our two presenters or any of the organizations on the call if anyone has any questions. Okay, well, if no one has any questions or comments, we will go back to the slideshow. We each put together a slide of things we wanted to leave you with related to some things that our organizations are doing. So we'll go back to that. Just to start, we're a reminder that we are going to be sending out the recording of this discussion. So for those of you who had to leave early, and we have some action steps that we are suggesting. So obviously one of them is substituting animal dairy with plant-based alternatives. We were suggesting that a great way to include this information into a Shavuot learning would be to have a discussion about what the Torah says about animal welfare. And then, as always, we always ask that you share the message that we've shared with you with 8 friends and tell them what you learned. This little image over here is the guide that we're going to be sending out later so that you'll get it. It has links to all the recipes. And so the next slide then is from Shamayim. So I wanted to invite all of you to join us for a conversation this Shabbat. We're going to be hosting Jenny Goldfarb of Unreal Deli at the Great Big Jewish Food Fest. It's this Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and you can sign up through the Great Big Jewish Food Fest and just type the word vegan or Shamayim and you'll find the event. We'd love to have you join us. It should be an interesting conversation about vegan food, but the food of our ancestors, like corned beef, and being able to eat it in a modern and ethical way. We are also going to be launching a plant-based summer speaker series that we'll be putting information out about on the beginning of June. So we really hope you'll sign up to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and at our website so that you can be invited to join us for those things. And then next slide.
Okay, and thank you so much, Lisa. So at Jewish Veg, we have a variety of things going on right now. So I just want to talk about one very briefly, which is our new program, which is called Plant Pathways. And we are so excited to be beginning this program. It's going to be an amazing community support system for those who are transitioning to veg eating in whatever capacity that may be, whatever your own personal plant path is. And so please sign up at jewishveg.org for our newsletter to get more information on that and the rest of our programs. And while you're there, do not forget to check out our recipes. You will be receiving some of these in the follow-up document that will be sent out to you. But we have vegan cheesecakes, we have blintzes, we have ice cream, we have matzo ball soup and brisket. We have tons and tons and tons of recipes of plant-based foods that are really incredible and will really liven up your Jewish celebrations of all sorts of holidays. So please check those out. And again, go to jewishveg.org, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll be the first to hear about all of our programs and events.
Hey everyone. Sorry, I have that dog barking noise in the background, so you might hear that throughout this slide. JIFA also has a variety of things we're offering. As I mentioned earlier, we have our Shavuot text study resource that REA created to deepen your learning around the origin of food traditions and making conscious food choices during Shavuot and year round. So you can find that in our community resources hub on our website, and there will be a link to that in the follow-up email. You can also contact us for ways to incorporate Jewish values into your current virtual community programs. We've been invited, since everyone's going online right now, although I totally respect the decision to not be online. But since people are looking for content for their summer camps, for their shuls, even for their school programs upcoming, we are available to work with folks on adapting content and offering lessons and one-off presentations for schools and camps that are interested. And so please contact us if you're associated with one of those institutions or organizations that's looking for content. As I mentioned earlier, you can also join our Jewish Leadership Circle and receive free consultation for your Jewish institution to adopt sustainable and humane food sourcing practices. And if you're interested in learning about some of the members of that community and cohort, you can feel free to check out our website and contact me.
Hello, everybody. Becky here again with Hazon. And we have a resource page on Shavuot on our website, and that hyperlink there will be on the guide that Lisa will be sharing out with everybody after this event. We also encourage you to go to hazon.org and check out our environmental Teshuvah page and look at environmental actions related to food and otherwise that you can be taking year round. And Hazon, the book We Are the Weather, Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast, is all about the intersection of our food choices and specifically industrial animal agriculture and climate change. And we created a discussion guide for the Jewish community that you can use to have just explore the book more personally on your own, more widely with the group. That's available for free download on our website. Hazon has a program called the Seal of Sustainability, and it is a way for Jewish institutions to get a roadmap for making choices to be more sustainable, including food choices very much for sure, but beyond that as well, from gardening to transportation to insulation and all kinds of ways to be Shomer Adama, guardians of the earth. And that's hazon.org/seal. And if you haven't been online enough lately and you're looking for a little more screen time, we will be doing a We Are the Weather online book club tomorrow night. or tomorrow afternoon, depending what time zone you're on. And so I'm going to put my email address there in the group chat. So if you're not able to, I'm realizing I'm not sure the exact timing of when the email with these links will be coming out. So be in touch with me if you'd like to register for that. You can also just go to hazon.org and search for We Are the Weather and it will come up. But it's tomorrow night. And we will be diving into this book and this conversation more deeply. And you're welcome to join us. And seeing the other slide that Lisa had up, Hassan's also doing a section at the Great Big Jewish Food Fest, a couple of different ones there. So I strongly recommend the Great Big Jewish Food Festival to everybody. It's going on for many days. It just started. So go to greatbigjewishfoodfestival.org and you'll find lots of really interesting opportunities there. So thank you.
And just to close, I think Melissa will take away the slideshow. I just want to thank our partners and thank everyone for joining us for today, and the people who taught lessons. I think they were fabulous. We're so happy to have all of you joining us. I want to wish you a happy early Shavuot, and just for me personally to say that I find this so uplifting to see how many people are interested in having this kind of conversation. It can be hard being people that work for animals, and it's very uplifting to see how many people wanted to discuss this and are watching on Facebook Live as well. So happy early Shavuot. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our partners. Please stay tuned. We plan to do a lot of these around the year, around different holidays, and we'd love to have you join us again.
Thanks, everyone. Chag Sameach.